So what is actually the real position on abortion? That's what we want to explore. And I'm just a messenger, really. I'm just going to bring out the sources and explore what actually our sages said about this. Okay, so whether you agree or not, that's what we have. And the first question is always, like the question that you always hear is, when does life begin? So there's the pro-life, there's the pro-choice. When does life begin? Which is a silly question. What does that mean, when does life begin?
When it's inside, it's a real life.
Yeah, like how do you define life? I mean, biologically, we're going to use a lot of biological definitions here.
Well, if it grows, it's alive.
Right. From a biological perspective, I mean, the fundamental first point of the cell theory of biology is that the fundamental unit of life is the cell. Like as long as you have a cell, a working cell, that's already life. That's already alive. That's it. So as soon as you have sperm meets egg, you have a single cell embryo, that's already a life, obviously. So this question of when does life begin is a silly question. It begins immediately. It exists already before conception. So life begets more life. So that's not really the question that we need to ask. Because just because there's a life there, the question is, when can we abort that life? At which point do we say, okay, that's already too much life? Well, with one cell, which, well, bacteria is one cell. We kill bacteria all the time. We don't think about it. We sanitize, we spray, whatever. We're constantly killing bacteria. That's a single cell. So at which point is the life meaningful enough? Is there enough life that we say, okay, that we can't kill? That's already would be considered killing or murder or something like that. That's the big question. Okay, so in other words, the question is, when does this life have a soul? The answer is actually amazing, because the religious answer is also a scientific answer. One of the big puzzles in biology to this day, one of the big mysteries, is how does the cell know to do what it's doing? We know what the cell is doing. We know the how. We know the mechanisms. We know all the proteins and enzymes and everything. But how does it know to do that? And how do cells know to differentiate? When you look at embryology, when you look at how the embryo develops in the womb, how does it know? You have one cell, and then it starts to divide, and it's a bundle of cells, which are all identical, and then somehow those identical cells start to become different. Right? All the cells of your body have the same DNA. Except for your reproductive cells, all the cells of your body have the same number of chromosomes, same genome, everything's the same. The only thing that's different is which genes are turned on and off, basically. And then based on that, the expression's different. The gene expression is what's different and makes different cells. So that's what I was doing when I was in university. What I was doing research in was in epigenetics. Epigenetics is this whole field of how genes are turned on and off, essentially. So all the genome's the same in every cell. But how does every cell know? How do your eyes know to become eyes and your ears know to become ears? Yeah. That's the question. And in the womb, that's an even bigger question, because how does this ball of cells that's undifferentiated become a body? Learn to have hands in the right places and legs in the right places and a head in the right spot. How does it do that? What is driving that differentiation? We have no idea. We know the genes involved, we know the mechanisms, and this does this to that, and this enzyme does this and this, but who is controlling all that? Sure. Where does that come from? Yeah, so some scientists will talk in biology, there's some people will use the term submicroscopic matrix. So I had a professor who really liked this, but it's rare to hear it. Submicroscopic matrix means there's some kind of submicroscopic, means we can't see it. Something that we can't see, submicroscopic, but some kind of matrix, some kind of field, an invisible field that guides everything inside the cell. If you think about it for a second, what a cell is, it's unbelievable. It's like a little mini city. There's so much going on in there, thousands and thousands of proteins and all kinds of things, and ribosomes and all the organelles that are doing their thing. How does it know to do all that? And it's all like super quick. If you look at the reaction rates in a cell, it's unbelievable. It's super fast. It's crazy. So there's this idea, there's a submicroscopic matrix that's guiding everything. Right? It sounds a little familiar, no? An invisible force that's guiding.
Dark matter?
Perhaps. But it seems like it's almost conscious, right? Because it knows what it's doing. So I had this professor. It was a fourth year course, and he's a pretty well-renowned biologist, evolutionist. And you know how it is when in your first year your class is like 600, 700, 800 people, and then it gets smaller and smaller. By the time you get to fourth year, it's a small group. So in our fourth year, we had a small group with this professor, and I was like sitting in the front row, almost something like that, up close. And I guess I'm religious, whatever, with the kippah. So he looks at me, and he's talking about this, right, about the submicroscopic matrix. And then he looks at me, and this is literally what happened. And he laughs and he says, "But I'm still an atheist." That's what he said. He looked at me and he knows that I'm like a religious guy sitting there. He's like, "But I'm still an atheist." And he laughs. And he laughs. And then after he laughed, he went on to tell me about all the biologists that are not atheists and that who are religious or believe in God in some way, all the big Nobel Prize winners and his professors who were all more religious than he was. Yeah. So it's funny. Actually, he quotes in his book Alfred Hershey. Do you remember the Hershey and Chase experiment in biology, high school biology class? 1952, the Hershey and Chase experiment. It's one of the main key experiments in the history of DNA that I'm not going to talk about now. But anyway, Hershey and Chase are two famous scientists. Alfred Hershey talked about this whole idea of the cell and embryology and cell differentiation. His words were, he called it a mystical principle. He said it's mystical. It's like it's such a puzzle. We have no idea how this works. And mystical is the perfect word for it because we need mysticism to explain it. And that's my segue to the Arizal. Because 500 years ago already, the Arizal already solved this puzzle for us. How does this bundle of cells know to grow? What is driving it to grow and divide and differentiate and take on a human form? What is doing that? Something invisible, some kind of submicroscopic matrix. This is what he wrote in Sefer HaLikutim. He didn't write it, that's wrong. That's what Rav Chaim Vital wrote, quoting his teacher, the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria, about 500 years ago. So, Sefer HaLikutim, it says like this. The Torah says, "Vayitzer ruach adam bekirbo." Okay, that's the pasuk. Be'ofan shekol od she'ubar olech vegodel. So the ubar, as the embryo, the fetus, is growing in the womb, ken haneshama hi nichneset bo. That's when the soul is entering this child. As the soul enters the child gradually, that is what's driving the growth of this baby. And he says that this is really the secret meaning behind the words haba'im mitzrayma. And he says, ki kochot haneshama ba'im me'at me'at. And then he continues, ve'achar kach be'et halida, and so on. He explains what happens. So it's happening slowly, me'at me'at, slowly, as this fetus is developing in the mother over 9 months. The neshama, or the soul, some soul, nefesh, is being infused into the child. And that's actually what's driving the development of this child. And it takes on its unique form. Yes?
So what about other animals, like an elephant? You know, they have the same process going on. Do they have a
Right.
soul?
Yes, absolutely, exactly. So the nefesh, animals also have a nefesh. The Arizal will explain elsewhere about the levels of soul. Maybe we discussed this once a long time ago. The lowest level is called the nefesh, then ruach, neshama, and then there's even 2 higher levels called chaya and yechida. So the lowest level, the nefesh, the Torah always tells us that the nefesh is in the blood. Hadamhu ha-nefesh, ha-nefesh bedamhu. Many times the Torah tells us that the nefesh is associated with the blood. So really, any animal that has a bloodstream, that has a life force, has nefesh. And that's one of the reasons why the whole reason for shchita. When we do the shchita and we have to drain the blood, we cannot consume any blood because the Torah says the nefesh is in the life force is in the blood, so you have to drain the blood because you don't want to consume the nefesh of the animal. So, animals have a nefesh too. And the Arizal will explain elsewhere that when a baby is born, it's basically nefesh. And then as it grows, as it's already a child, it absorbs more, it grows in the level of ruach. And then after a certain age, after bar bat mitzvah, it starts to develop in the level of neshama. And then by age 20, that's when a person can have their neshama in full, can access it fully. That's why, from a Torah perspective, a person's considered an adult when they're 20 years old. The Midrash says Adam and Eve were created as 20-year-olds. So a person's considered an adult as when they're 20. They would be called up to the military when they were 20, and so on. So 20 is the age of adulthood because that's when a person already has access to their full neshama. Doesn't mean that they're actually accessing it, and the Arizal makes that clear as well. Some people live their whole life like nefesh, like an animal. So we all have those levels available. The question is, are we accessing those levels? It's like working out your body physically. We all have the potential to have, big muscles and whatever, and to be the top whatever athlete in peak physical condition. But most of us are not. So there's different levels of being in physical shape. Same thing spiritually. We all have the potential to be in top physical, spiritual shape at the level of the Yechidah. But most people are not quite there. We are required to at least be at the level of neshama. But most people live an animalistic lifestyle like a nefesh their whole life, just like an animal. So anyway, so the Arizal tells us that it's the infusion of soul that's actually driving the growth of this fetus. And all growth, generally. Now you can also understand why your growth generally stops around age 20, physically even. The neshama keeps infusing into your body as you're growing. And then at some point you basically stop growing physically, right? And there's still some, after age 20, it's mostly just the brain is still developing, and those are the higher levels, chaya, yechidah, that are being infused into the body. So that's the idea, that the body grows. The body is just material. What is driving the growth of this physical substance is spiritual infusion. That's the idea. So at which point now, in the fetus, in the embryological development, at which point can we say that this fetus is a human? Like how much soul is a human soul? Or is it just an animal? Because we're allowed to...
There's actually blood in the system?
There is, but yeah. So let's find out all these questions. At which point maybe is there blood? Is that what we need? But how much nefesh do we need? And at which point we say, okay, this is already killing something. That's the question. So there's an interesting discussion in Masechet Yevamot. And it says, it's kind of unrelated, but it's going to answer this question. It says like this, Bat Kohen shenisat leIsrael. Let's say you have a daughter of a Kohen, the daughter of a priest, and she marries a non-priest, a regular Israel. Vamet. Now her husband died. So she just got married. She's the daughter of a Kohen. She married a non-Kohen. Now her husband died for whatever reason. Now, okay, she says that she is tovelet. She purifies herself. Ve'ochelet betruma. And she's allowed to eat truma. Truma was the donations that were given to the priests. Only Kohanim could eat this. A non-Kohen was forbidden from eating. It would be non-kosher for a non-Kohen to eat this, for a regular Jew. Only Kohanim could eat truma. A daughter of a Kohen obviously can eat it because she is in his household, so she's the daughter of a priest. She eats. But once she gets married, she no longer belongs to her family, her priestly family. When the daughter of a Kohen marries a non-Kohen, she becomes a non-Kohen. So she can no longer eat truma because now she joins her husband's family. But now he died, her husband. So the law is, since her husband's passed away, she now reverts back to being a Bat Kohen. So now she's allowed again to eat from the priestly foods. That's the rule. Now, Amar Rav Chisda, Tovelet ve'ochelet ad 40. Now, this she can only do until the 40 days afterwards. She can do this for the first 40 days. Why? The question is, did she get pregnant or not? Because if she's pregnant, now she has a child, now she actually has her own family, and once you have a family, you don't revert back to your priestly family. Even if the husband passed away, you already have your own children. So now you have offspring with your husband. Now you're fully belonging, attached to your husband's family, essentially. You don't go back to being a Bat Kohen. Saying until 40 days, it's cool. You can do it. Because now, why until 40 days? What's going on? Rav Chisda is saying that really, what he's saying is, either she's not pregnant, the husband died. So if she's not pregnant, then she reverts to being a Bat Kohen, and she can eat truma. But what if she got pregnant? We don't know if she's pregnant or not. It's too early to tell. But in the first 40 days, since we don't know if she's pregnant or not, we can assume that she's not, and she can eat. If it turns out that then she's pregnant, then she stops eating from the truma. But if the first 40 days is not an issue, either she's not pregnant, or she is, But it doesn't really matter because, and Rav Chizda concludes, Ad Arba'im Maya, that the fetus is like water. In the first 40 days, it's like she doesn't have a child yet. Okay, so you see the problem?
But is that the case that they chose 40 days for that reason, or did they choose 40 days here because that's conveniently the number of days roughly with a woman's cycle plus or minus a few extra days?
Yeah, it also happens to be that for sure after a month, okay, you've missed your period, and plus you have enough time to say, okay, I'm probably pregnant,
Right.
yes.
So is it that it's like water or that?
Let's see.
parallel?
That's what we have to answer. We have yet to answer why 40 days. Right? We know that the rule is 40 days.
Got it.
So because presumably up until 40 days, the fetus is considered like water. That's what the Gemara is saying here. After 40 days, it's like a child, and she's considered a mother already. And she no longer reverts to her old family. She's already, that's it, she's a mother of this family. By the way, if you like Gematria, it's a really good one of the best, I think. It's really fun. Yeah, the word for a mother in Hebrew, a mother is M, right? Aleph, Mem. So the numerical value of a mother, Aleph is 1, Mem is 40, so M is 41. So mother in Hebrew, literally the numerical value of mother is 41, because from day 41 of a pregnancy, she's a mom. That's it. Woman's considered a mother from day 41. That's the rule. Why? What about a father?
3.
Av. Our father is Av. Av is Aleph Bet. It's 1 and 2. It's just 3.
Plus M.
Think about that. No, leave that aside. If the mother becomes a mother,
Do you have a reason for the 3?
yeah, I mean, think about it. The mother,
The wife and the baby and the father. 3.
the mother becomes a mother at day 41. When does the father become a father?
3 days after the baby's born.
You think? No, earlier. The father's job is essentially a sperm donor. It takes up to 3 days for the sperm to meet the egg. The sperm can survive for about 3 days inside. And then, so by day 3, he's already the father. He's done. His job's done. The father's job, he's done that's as far as the father goes. So by day 3, huh?
Job is never done.
I'm joking, obviously. Of course, I don't mean done like that. I mean, in terms of producing the child, by day 3, he's either a father or not. That's it. Then the mother takes over. And then of course, raising a child requires both parents, of course.
Wait, but it continues. If you do M,
Yeah.
which is 41, plus Av equals
Right.
44,
Yeah.
Yelid
Yeah, Yeled is 44. That's right. The child, Yeled, Yud Lamed Daled is
plus
45.
Av equals Yelid.
Good. Yeah, you can play with that. I didn't continue because once I start, I won't stop. So we have this rule now that in the first 40 days, we consider this still not a child. From day 41, it's a child. Now, what's amazing is, to go back to your point, why 40 days? Today we know scientifically that what happens around day 40, the first neurons are actually formed and start firing around day 40, which is really amazing, right? Because if you're talking about consciousness, when we're talking about soul, we usually tie the soul with the consciousness. So if there's any kind of consciousness, it would probably only start around day 40, because that's when the first neurons start firing. The heart, around day 20, 22, 21, 22, you already have the first cells that will be the heart are already forming. And then by day 40, you already have the first neurons. So that's really amazing that our sages said 2,000 years ago that until day 40, they knew it, right? Our sages said 2,000 years ago that at day 41, it's a child. Today we know scientifically, amazingly, that at day 41, you have the first neurons firing. So if there's any kind of consciousness or higher level life, it's going to start there. It's really amazing. Okay, now, when it comes to abortion, that's what we have to discuss. When maybe you can abort, maybe you can't. Can we never abort? Are there situations where we can? So we have this rule now that until day 40, maybe, let's see, it's not considered a child yet. So now we're going to jump to another Gemara in Sanhedrin. So page 57, it says like this. It's talking about a discussion of the Noahide laws. Remember the Noahide laws? There's 7 laws for all mankind. 613 laws in the Torah for Jews. 7 laws in the Torah for Bnei Noach, for all the children of Noah, which is everybody on the planet. So Noah, the whole world has 7 laws, we have 613. Together, 613 plus 7, there's 620 commandments. In the whole Torah, there's 620 commandments, which is, as the Baal HaTurim points out, and others, that's how many letters there are in the text of the 10 Commandments. If you look at the text in Shmot and Exodus, the text of the 10 Commandments, count how many letters make up the 10 Commandments. It's 620 exactly. Why? Because the 10 Commandments are like the first 10, they're like 10 categories, 10 headings. And under those 10 headings are all the other 620 commandments that are given in the Torah. Okay, 620 is also the numerical value of Keter, the crown of God, the first Sphira, the will of God, which was to reveal 620 laws. So 613 laws for Israel, 7 laws for the Noahites. So this is a discussion of Noahide laws. First it starts by saying that a ben Noach ne'erag bedayan echad. We know that Jewish courts have to have a minimum of 3 judges, and then sometimes more, 23, 70. But for a regular court, a secular court, a Noahide court, you're allowed to have 1 judge. You can have just 1 judge, which is what we see, right? In secular courthouses in the Western world, you usually just have 1 judge. So that's cool. That's fine. With Jewish law, no problem. You can have 1 judge. Now, they're saying that a Noahide can be given a capital punishment, can be sent for execution with just 1 judge. And Rabbi Ishmael says, Af alau barin. Even if, and this is a Noahide law, so even if he kills a fetus, execution. He can be sent, given the capital punishment. Okay. How do they know? So they're saying, how did Rabbi Ishmael know this? Where did he get it? And it's a beautiful derivation. Beautiful. Because it says in Bereshit, Shofech dam, this is the pasuk. The Torah says, Shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam, damo ishapech. That's the pasuk. We've heard this before many times. What does that really mean? Rabbi Ishmael is saying, listen to what it's saying. Ezu adam she'u ba'adam. Right? So Hevei omer ze ubar shebe'emei imo. Because the pasuk says, somebody who is shofech dam, who spills the blood, ha'adam, of a man, ba'adam, which literally means inside of a person. Somebody who slays a person inside of a person. That's the literal meaning of this verse. So Rabbi Ishmael says it's obvious. What is a person inside of a person? It's the fetus, right? A child inside of a mother. That's what the verse is referring to. So it's a clear derivation of the Noahide laws from Bereshit chapter 9, that even on a fetus, if a person kills a fetus, it would be a death penalty. They could be subject to a capital punishment. Okay. Now, this is Noahide law, by the way. There's a different question about Jewish law, and that I don't want to get into, about all the different possibilities. The Torah doesn't really talk about this directly, but if you remember, there's a place in the Torah where it says if 2 men are fighting, and then a pregnant woman gets between them to try and stop the fight, and then she gets hurt and loses the baby. Do you remember that? So there is no death penalty, but that's an accidental. There's for sure compensation, but there's no death penalty. But that makes sense because it's accidental. She got in the way of 2 guys fighting, so nobody meant to kill a fetus. That wasn't intentional, and that there's many discussions about that. So in rabbinic debate, there's a question of whether for a Jew also it would be capital punishment or not for abortion, because we have a clear source for the Noahide laws, because it's from Bereshit chapter 9. Now, are we Noahides or not? I mean, we're human beings. Is this a law for all human beings or all mankind? Because generally, we still keep what the Jews keep, all the Noahide laws, plus extra, right? So then there's a discussion, different opinions of how do we deal with the law for us. Now, putting it all together, we're saying that before day 40, it's not really quite yet a child. Doesn't have much nefesh, it's more like water. So I know for sure that there are opinions that say that before day 40, there is room for some leniency, but doesn't mean leniency that you can have an abortion just like whenever you feel like any time. It means if there's a really good reason to do so, The default position is that abortion in Jewish law is forbidden. But if there's a really good reason for the abortion, and it might even be rape is, God forbid, is one of them for sure. Even other forms of intense psychological, emotional distress, all kinds of things. So obviously health things. Then if there's a really good reason to do it, then before day 40 would be the time to do it. And I know Rav Chaim Ozer Grodzinski is one of the people that said before day 40, there is room to be lenient, when there's a good reason to do so. And after day 40, it's already highly problematic. At that point, it would have to be a life risk. We know from another place, I'm sure we've all heard this before, that the Talmud and our sages discuss this, that you are allowed to abort a child if the mother's life's at risk, at any stage. At any point in the 9 months of pregnancy, if the mother's life is at risk, then you have to abort, because you have to save the mother. The mother's life is a priority, because she's a full soul. She's alive. She's a mother. And then you have a nefesh that's growing, but the mother takes priority at that moment. But if the mother's life is not at risk, then you have all kinds of... That's where you have to consult a competent halachic authority. So the real issue that we have is after day 40, which is not much. That's only, 6 weeks? After 6 weeks, to do an abortion is a big problem. And I mean, we all have kids. Yeah, almost. You've probably seen an ultrasound. But you go for the 10-week ultrasound. You see a child. How can you abort after 10 weeks? You see a little person there already, right? You go to the 20-week ultrasound. I went to all the ultrasounds with my kids. You see the 20 weeks old is already a human being over there. You tickle it, moves, laughs. Right? So how can you abort after? I know somebody who was born at 26 weeks and survived. So how can you have people who abort at 30, 31 weeks, voluntary abortion? That's just you can't do that. In conclusion, we have 40 days. From day 41, a woman's already a mother. It's considered a child. After 41 days, you would need really very few cases where you could have an abortion after day 41. If you know, God forbid, if it was like a case of rape, you just get the abortion right away. Why would you wait 7 weeks or more, right? You just do it right away. If you know that you can't have this baby for whatever reason, it should be done immediately. You can't wait till week 30 and say, you know what, no, I think I've changed my mind about having this baby.
There could be extreme circumstances in that case also.
Always, yeah.
A woman could be very scared to come forward,
Right.
and it passes the 6 week
That's
mark.
right. Yeah.
What do you do in that case?
Yeah, you would have to look at each individual circumstance. Yeah, there's always a possibility to have the abortion. Always, yeah. So you'd have to go to a proper halachic authority, figure out what the precedents are and how, if you can do it or not.
If abortion not even allowed legally in the country, then that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, but that's not what happened in the United States. They didn't make it illegal. They just said the federal government's not involved. Every state will decide what. And some states are saying it's not allowed, but the liberal states still allowed. Didn't change anything for people in California and New York. And,
New York or whatever.
yeah. So that's the idea. Okay. It's also worth mentioning in Yirmiyahu, which we read in you've all read this in the Haftarah, that God tells right at the beginning, the prophet Yirmiyahu says, "Beterem atzocha babeten yeda'aticha," like I knew you before you were even conceived. Right? So when you were in the belly, before you came out, God says, "Beterem tetzeh merechem hikdashticha navi lagoim." So God told Yirmiyahu, the prophet, he said, when you were still in your mother's womb, I sanctified you as a prophet for all the nations. So, you got to think about that. Somebody who's thinking about getting an abortion, you might be carrying a prophet inside of you. You don't know who you're carrying, right? Yirmiyahu, God is saying, when you were in the womb, I already made you a prophet. Okay, so we'll end with that one.